Welcome to the Unveiled Epic Echoes channel. Today, we're diving deep into an unexplored historical mystery. On a quiet spring night in Washington, D.C., not long after the nation had fallen into stunned silence at the death of Abraham Lincoln, the air itself seemed to hold its breath as whispers passed through candle-lit corridors and between heavy velvet drapes in government buildings that had seen too much sorrow to sleep. For just days after the tragic evening at Ford's when the president's life had been cut short, an unexpected discovery was made that would trouble even the most composed of men. A discovery that began with a maintenance worker named Elias who had been tasked with inspecting the lower foundations of the White House, a place that felt less like a home and more like a living monument to the fragile dream of unity that Lincoln had fought to preserve. And as walked slowly through narrow passages lined with brick that smelled faintly of lime and dust, he came upon a draft that should not have been there, a cold breath of air whispering through stone as though the house itself were sighing in grief. And following it with a lantern held low, he found behind a long-forgotten shelving alcove a seam in the wall that did not match the rest, a slender line barely visible in the low light. And when his hand brushed across it, the stone gave way with a sound so soft it seemed almost reluctant, revealing a narrow wooden door secured by an iron latch darkened with age and neglect. And inside lay a room untouched by time, its air still and faintly perfumed with the scent of old parchment and something else. Something earthy and ancient that did not belong to the modern age of war and telegraphs, but to a deeper past, as though secrets had been planted there long before the Republic itself had taken root. And within that dim chamber stood a single writing desk beneath a curtained window too narrow to admit daylight, a trunk reinforced with brass corners, and on the far wall an intricate map drawn in ink, so faded it seemed part of the paper itself, showing not the familiar boundaries of American states, but strange overlapping grids and symbols that marked rivers and valleys in ways no surveyor would recognize. And when reported the find the next morning, it drew the immediate attention of whose weary eyes had not closed since the assassination, and who arrived with the grim resolve of a man who knew that even in death Lincoln's burdens might not yet be lifted, accompanied by a small detachment sworn to silence. And as they entered the hidden room together felt an inexplicable chill, not of fear but of reverence, as though the walls themselves were witnesses to an oath never spoken aloud. And among the papers on the desk were letters bearing Lincoln's unmistakable hand, written not in the formal tone of policy, but in quiet reflection, speaking of dreams he had experienced in the months before his death. Dreams of corridors beneath the nation's capital, and of voices carried on wind through forests untouched by time. And references to meetings with scholars and travelers who claimed to possess knowledge of civilizations older than the colonies, their stories of subterranean sanctuaries and relics hidden in the earth, dismissed publicly as superstition, yet evidently taken seriously enough by the president to warrant investigation. And in the trunk, they found artifacts that no official record would ever mention. Fragments of pottery etched with geometric patterns that resembled indigenous motifs, yet were unlike any known tribal work. A small compass whose needle refused to settle pointing north, and a bound journal detailing expeditions to remote valleys and caves across the continent where Lincoln believed the nation's earliest and most sacred truths might be buried. Truths that spoke not only of liberty, but of an enduring covenant between land and people that transcended the divisions of war. And as the lantern light flickered across those pages, realized that this room had not been a refuge for idle curiosity, but a sanctuary for contemplation, a place where Lincoln had retreated in the loneliest hours of leadership to consider mysteries that stretched beyond politics into the realm of destiny. And when Mary Todd Lincoln was quietly informed, she insisted on seeing the chamber herself, descending the narrow stair with a steadiness that belied her grief. And as she touched the edge of the desk, she whispered that her husband had often spoken of unfinished work that did not belong to any office, but to history itself, of voices that called to him from the ancient hills of America, and of a promise he felt bound to keep though he could not name it. And in that moment the room seemed less a secret than a testament, its hidden existence a reminder that even the most public of lives can contain private journeys into shadow and wonder. And though ordered, the chamber sealed once more its contents, catalogued and stored beyond the reach of rumor. The story of its discovery would linger in the hush of government halls, and in the imaginations of those who believed that Lincoln's vision for the nation had reached deeper than laws and amendments into the very soil beneath their feet, suggesting that unity was not merely a political achievement, but a timeless inheritance waiting to be rediscovered by each generation willing to listen for the quiet breath of forgotten truths. And as years passed, the hidden room became less a place than a legend whispered by caretakers and archivists alike. Its existence in public yet felt in the subtle drafts that moved through basement corridors, and in the occasional echo of footsteps where none should be. Until at last the nation moved on as it always does, carrying forward the memory of a leader who had walked both in the light of duty and in the shadowed corridors of mystery, leaving behind a question that would never be fully answered, but would forever invite reflection in the silent hours before sleep, when history's deeper stories seem closest to the surface. And in that gentle uncertainty, the room endured, a quiet chamber beneath the House of Presidents, waiting for the day when its secrets might again be needed by a land still learning how to remember. This mysterious journey ends here, but stay tuned for more untold stories in our next video. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any new stories. Thank you, and see you again.